Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to wherever you are in YouTube land and on our various socials. Welcome back to another episode of the Happy Strong Family weekly live stream brought to you every Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern from the Masjid Darul Iman building in Markham. My name is Brother Mushtaq. I'm back in the chair once again. Off camera, I was just speaking with Saqib here, our guest for today's episode, about my time away from the podcast, but here and now, and there's nothing like the present. So, to bring everyone up to speed, it is my honor and pleasure to welcome to today's show Brother Saqib Qureshi. He has quite an esteemed biography, which I do have to go to his website and read, and I do want to read it before I introduce the man. It's very interesting, very different. You will pick up on a British accent. So yes, he is a fellow of the London School of Economics, and I see he's already blushing. He's been a film producer, interestingly enough. He's done several movies to his credit. He's also written for various newspapers like the Wall Street Journal, and he's also spent time in the Gulf, primarily in Dubai as well. So without further ado, and with today's topic on reviving entrepreneurship, do want to welcome to the show Saqib Qureshi. Saqib,
thank you very much for that rather humbling introduction. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So as we were discussing off air, entrepreneurship, it's a very wide, vast field. You know, entrepreneurship can mean many things to many people. Mm-hmm. How do we kind of tackle this? How do we deconstruct this? Let's unbox this. So where would you like to take the discussion? Again, we can kind of approach it as we were discussing off air from the perspective of how do we get our youth more into entrepreneurship? And I'm not talking about how do they become a YouTuber? Okay, I think that's well ingrained within a certain generation. It's like, oh, I want to become a YouTuber. And I tell as many of the youth in my circle, look, to become a YouTuber, to become like, Mr. Beast, it in and of itself, that takes a lot of work.
Right.
And it's not an instant path to success. For every, one Mr. Beast out there, if this even makes sense, there's like 1,000, 100,000, 1 million that didn't make it. Right. Mm-hmm. So let's look at a different career path, one of entrepreneurship, from the perspective of the youth. How can they get involved? What does it mean to them? And then also, just considering the nature of the show, from the angle of parents. So, Saqib, over to you.
Yeah, no. So entrepreneurship is a massive topic, like you say. I am a big proponent of it. I think it enables people to live far more authentic lives. It enables people to live lives that they are in control of. They don't have to succumb to the rat race. They don't have to wake up at 6:30 every morning and get into a miserable commute and then take orders and, end up doing an awful lot of work that they don't want to do, and then the commute back. So you kind of have a wonderful existence in entrepreneurship as a work-life balance, I think. And the other interesting thing for me in entrepreneurship is that there is no single set route into it. Like, does it require super intelligence? Does it require great networks and what have you? My answer is definitely not. So the defining characteristic of somebody who succeeds as an entrepreneur is somebody who's persistent, has some common sense, is willing to continuously pivot. And what I mean by that is somebody who starts a journey and in like 2 weeks realizes that they didn't know a bunch of things, and then they make a micro change. Okay. And then a month later, they realize, actually, you know what? It was not quite like that. And there's a door opening in this direction, and I'm going to probe there. So there's a series of micro changes in every entrepreneur's journey. You won't know the right answers on the day you start, as long as you're prepared to learn. And so that kind of learning curve piece is important. But once that's in place, I mean, I've seen many, many entrepreneurs start in a particular direction and fundamentally kind of hit a brick wall and say, this isn't going to work. But I've learned an awful lot from what I've done. And now I know a better path to pursue my entrepreneurial pursuits through. I know several people whose first entrepreneurial venture just didn't succeed and are now, into 8 figures plus, which is quite fantastic. And they're not the brightest people on the planet. They're not, amazingly well networked. They weren't kind of born with a silver spoon. But what they did have was tenacity and persistence and drive. And so, if you have younger people who are motivated, who want to do well, who have that resilience, that's the magic ingredient. If they can apply that resilience and persistence and energy and drive, and they can add to it a modicum of common sense and a willingness to kind of keep pivoting, fantastic. Nothing beats it. And for parents, I would say, look, the job market generally is extraordinarily tough for younger people. A lot of great jobs have been outsourced to other parts of the world as part of globalization. It's really, really tough getting a good job now. You have to make extraordinary sacrifices of human existence very, very early on. So when I was applying for jobs, we didn't really have to make up our minds until like we were graduating. Right? So now you got to make up your mind what you're doing with full vigor and commitment, like before your second year university starts.
For sure, even earlier.
Right. And so that's a very testing place to be, because how does a 19-year-old know the world? How do they even know themselves?
Right.
And so here they're having to make extraordinary commitments for their career without really having that handle. And for parents, I'd say, look, don't look at entrepreneurship as a backup. Definitely don't make that mistake, because the alternative is tough. It's very tough. It's getting involved in the rat race way earlier in life. It's committing to things that you haven't got the faintest idea what is what. I mean, my eldest son, for instance, he had aspirations to become a tech quant trader. Okay.
Yes.
And he's just finished his first year at university. And I pointed out to him, he's never even sat in the copy area of a tech kind of entrepreneur, a tech finance trading entrepreneurship kind of place. I said, you've never even been into a building. How would you know what it's like to work there? How would you know what the ethic is like, the culture is like, the actual hardcore work? What do you know? And he's like, well, yeah, maybe not. I said, no, you're not, maybe not. You don't know. But here you are having to go full steam ahead. And so, I think there's a big danger in pushing children to doing careers where in 10 years' time, they kind of figure out, this isn't for me. This is not for me. I have a friend who is a miserable physician who kind of realized 10 years into his career as a physician in his early 30s. He said, no, I don't, this is horrible. This is miserable. Why am I doing this? But he can't get out.
Okay,
he's stuck. So there's a strong case to kind of say, look, the current career universe is very, very rat race focused, and you have to commit very early. Entrepreneurship allows you to hold back a bit. It says, yeah, you know what? I'm going to graduate. I'm going to figure out what kind of business I'm going to get involved in. I'm going to raise the capital for it by demonstrating to investors that there's a fantastic case here. Okay, and I'm going to get going. And I won't get it right on day one, which is fine. I will make changes and I will eventually get it right.
Right. Okay, so let's take this a step further. You've mentioned micro changes, which to me speaks of adaptability. And yes, to your point, Saqib, don't hold it against me. I've spent a better part of my professional life in the corporate world. At one time, I was working for a Paris-based company, so I would make multiple trips to Paris. And I've probably mentioned this in past episodes, but literally what got me through the 9 years of having to go back and forth in Paris is, pardonnez-moi, monsieur, je suis parler de français, mais petit peu, meaning I speak only but a little bit of French, and literally it would melt the heart of every Parisian. I don't even know if it would still work to this day, but yeah, those are my fond memories of being in a very corporate, very buttoned up kind of environment, especially of all places in Paris, where the Olympics are happening right now. So it's a different corporate culture. It's one that is very hardened to kind of even bring outsiders in. And I don't even want to get on that soapbox. But that being said, when you speak of micro changes, when you speak of pivoting, when you speak of adaptability, grit, resilience, these are all things that now people in the HR world, whether they're looking at it from like a very quote unquote human capital management perspective, just good people, good talent, meaning you have the basis, the core of a good company. How can we kind of further kind of instill that into this younger generation, that, it is all about putting in the effort to get to where you want to be. It's not just, hey, I'll throw up a YouTube channel, and we were alluding to this off air, right? It's not that I'm just going to be on whichever, TikTok, whatever, and then I'll just be very social, and that's how I'll build my following. Obviously, as an entrepreneur, as you've experienced yourself, you got to put in the hard work, some of the steps. So maybe let's kind of deconstruct that. What are the steps? You've mentioned common sense, the ability to pivot and all of this, but what should an entrepreneur do? Is there like a roadmap? Is there maybe a strategic plan in place? Like even at a high level, what can someone wanting to be an entrepreneur do to put themselves in the hot seat?
So I've strongly advocated that the ages of 14 to 18 are the most important years to get right. And that doesn't mean you get your career right. That doesn't mean you have your career planning, but it does mean that you excel. You don't waste your time. Those 4 years, the kids who can get on top of their grades and do a bunch of interesting things of their choice, and don't waste their time watching YouTube videos and flicking through, all of that, and messing around with PlayStations all day. The kids who can really hit the home runs in those 4 years, will find that for the next 40 years, they're at an advantage. An unfair advantage. It's a massively unfair advantage, and it carries with them for decades. So, and it's very, very, very unfair to say, if you do well in those 4 years, the benefit of that will carry for 40, in a very profound way. So that's the very first step that I recommend to any young person, entrepreneur or not. Get on top of those 4 years, hit the grades at school time and again, A grades, B grades, nothing less than that. Have a and do a bunch of activities which are productive, which demonstrate success, and which you get used to that culture. Then after that, really, my advice to anybody thinking of being an entrepreneur is ideally get into a top tier university. Get the brand in, get a top tier brand under your resume, get it done, enjoy a broader human existence outside of your family home, understand the world a little bit more, plot your entrepreneurial journey. Bounce things around, go to the business school, knock on their door, go meet a professor perhaps, or somebody, search the universe from the vantage point from university. And I'm not saying university is going to give you everything, but it's a terrific place to kind of get your grounding, to get a sense as to what's happening in the world. And when you leave university, ideally, if you want to be an entrepreneur, go for it. Get a bunch of mentors on board who've got experience, who've done this before, and just say, would you mind if I touch base with you every 2 weeks? Every 2 weeks, can you, like 20 minutes of your time? Okay. And I can promise you, there are a lot of people out there who are more than willing to give back to younger people. Just, I need 20 minutes of your time. I want to tell you what I'm doing. I want to tell you what I want to be doing in the next 2 weeks. And here's the kind of thing that I think I really need a bit of help on. What do you think? Okay. You just need 3 or 4 like that, maybe even 2, and you get going. And that is it. And beyond that, energy. You energize. You literally throw heart, soul, mind into that. Yes, you're going to pivot. Yes, you're going to learn some new things. But with that approach, it's really hard to fail. Like, it is not, there is a fantastic correlation between energy and drive and kind of commitment and entrepreneurial success. There's a fantastic correlation between the two. There's no other correlation that I'm aware of. And I have invested in more than 25 businesses. I've been an entrepreneur for more than a dozen years. I've never seen any other link. I've often looked at people and thought, that guy's not particularly smart. He doesn't have many qualifications. He was born in semi-poverty even. But damn, he's done extraordinarily well as an entrepreneur. And I've seen this again and again. And then you look at other people who are like, born to multi-millionaire parents and, had great qualifications, but as entrepreneurs just didn't have it because they don't have that ethic. They don't have that persistence and drive, that tenacity, that willingness to go through brick walls when it's needed. And I know that wears off with time, because when you hit my age, and you were like dinosaur type, 50 years old now, when you hit that age, that energy does begin to kind of pull back a bit. But if you're younger, you ought really not to have the same issues that I have. Like, you really ought to be able to go through brick walls if you want to succeed. And the people who can do that, even for a small amount of time, 2, 3, 4 years, really set themselves up. It's a fantastic place to be, because then you can breathe. You can actually breathe. You can actually choose on a Wednesday morning at 7 a.m. and say, look, you know what? Don't really want to go into work right now. I'm just going to call in my assistant and let her know that for the first 4 hours of the day, cancel everything.
Yes, absolutely. There's a benefit for sure. 100%.
And you don't have that headache. You don't have the headache. And so my advice to anybody wanting to become an entrepreneur, get on top of your first 4 years, 14 to 18, hit the home run, absolutely nail it, get into a top tier university, brood, pontificate, reflect, research, brainstorm, connect, and then carve out the entrepreneurial journey from there. Get a few mentors on board who will give you 20 minutes of their time every 2 weeks. You're done.
Okay. So then, Saqib, I'm going to pick apart what you've mentioned. You've mentioned you have one son. Three sons.
Yes.
Okay.
And all three know more about the world than I do.
Phenomenal. That's the way it should be.
Yes.
But like you, I'm in October, I'll be 50. So I too am now becoming that dinosaur. I fully understand it. It is what it is. But for me now, it's that legacy. It's how can I give back and be that mentor, be that coach. So to your point, yes, absolutely. Look, you and I are prime examples. For anyone younger to say, hey, I want to pick your brain. I just want to check in with you. Yeah, 100%. Why wouldn't I? Right? It's selfish of me not to do that, because then how do I pass on this knowledge, this experience I've gained? So to anyone kind of questioning, what is this whole mentorship thing? Does it even make sense to check in every 2 weeks? Yeah, 100% it does. You knock on doors, and if some people say no, then that's fine.
Yes.
That's their prerogative. But more often than not, people who are willing to give back, and people who understand the concept of servant leadership, and people who understand the concept of, yes, I do have a legacy. And I do have a responsibility to give back. And this is just one way of giving back. Yeah, 100%. But let's kind of take this a step further. You're a father of 3 sons. Okay. Now put on your parent hat. And how does this then work, Saqib? What advice can you give to parents? Look, and I'll take your advice as well. I have 3 children. I've mentioned it on various episodes. My eldest daughter, my son right now, in January, he'll be 15. But does he endlessly kind of scroll on the phone? Yes, 100%. YouTube shorts and all that kind of stuff, right? And as much as I try, I'm like, Shahir, stop spending time on the phone. And he's like, oh, Baba, I'm watching basketball. I'm like, regardless, there's more to do than just endlessly scrolling on YouTube shorts, right? So as a father, what are some of the tips? What are some of the pointers you can provide to parents who I think many are in the same boat right now? Many are grappling with just this concept of, how do I get my child to do more than just being on this phone or being on a device, or even if it's on their laptop? Not going to mention who, but of my own children, she calls it multitasking. I'm like, you're watching a screen, and you're apparently doing your homework, and you're watching this episode. I'm like, how is that even possible? Like when I was growing up, 1, I didn't have a cell phone. 2, I didn't have an iPad. But for me, it was, yes, look, I'll be the first to say, I would watch TV. Okay. I had that old RCA TV, the 26-inch with the big cathode ray. Kids nowadays probably have to like Google it. And what is this guy talking about? What is this kind of TV? Such a thing existed. It's in the museum now, apparently. So as a father, what tips and tricks, and take as much time as you want. I think parents are all for it. They need to kind of understand, oh, look at Brother Saqib. It's so easy. He's talking about, hey, become an entrepreneur. You'll have flexibility. You can pivot. You can, you can be successful. My kids literally have a song for Jeffrey Bezos. They sing it in the car. I don't know where this came up from, but like Jeffrey Bezos. I'm like, oh my God, this man's turned into a meme, into a song for this generation. Like, it's crazy. But again, as a parent, I implore you, Saqib, tell us now for however many minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Oh, this guy's like putting up his eyebrow. He's getting all tense here. Okay. Quickly, Kashif, pan to him, pan to Saqib.
Oh my God.
So this might be a loaded question, might be a difficult question, but there you go. Floor is yours.
So I've got 3 teenage boys, and I don't think there's any one simple solution that's worked across all 3. So that's,
I get it. I totally get it.
So some of them respond in one way, others respond in a different way.
100%.
Okay. One thing that I have done, which is common to all 3, is that I had drip fed it to them success stories in my friends and family's network.
Okay.
So once in a while, oh, did you know that Sabine has done this? Or did you know that so-and-so has done that? Or my friend has done this, or my friend's son did this. So there's a drip feeding, okay? So the benchmarks against which they are kind of implicitly going after are laid out. the benchmarks aren't with people who just about got into a university. No, that's not a benchmark. It might be for some people, but it's not the benchmark that I want for my children. And so those benchmarks, whether it's a success story of somebody who's 50 years old or 15 years old, they're fed. And they're fed in a way which is not like an abstract, oh, I read in the newspaper some kid did this. No, my friend's son or my nephew or my brother or my childhood friend has done the following. So there's a piece around that. It sets the kind of benchmarks up. I filter that information to them. The second thing that has worked with 2 of my 3 boys was to encourage them to do a project in the summer. I said to them when they're 12 years old, I said, I don't care what project you do in the summer. I don't care what it is. It's got to be something quite spectacular.
Okay.
2 of them wrote a book.
Wow.
Separately.
Awesome.
And they had that published before they were 13 years old and on Amazon, and it made them feel good. It gave them a sense that if they put the effort in, they got something out.
Right.
Okay. And it also made them realize that they can achieve. Like, when I was 12, I was not in the universe of writing books. Like, and now you got a 12-year-old who thinks, yeah, I've written a book, and so what? It raises their standard and raises their self-expectations.
I get it. Yes, definitely.
And so that hasn't worked for all 3 of my sons. There's one who hasn't really bought into that yet, and I'm still kind of toying around with different avenues and ideas. But the point is, the third point that I want to make actually in this particular context is that it's really important not to let children feel that they are loved as a function of their success.
Okay.
Which is something important. That can go wrong. You can praise a child endlessly for their A grades and their accomplishments on the team circuit, sports circuit, but you can also end up denying them that they are loved as innate human beings. That's very important that they feel that love.
Definitely.
Independent of any performance or success or failure.
Yes.
And that grounds children in a way which I think is really important. And so I'm sensitive to praising my kids exclusively when they do well. Like I will praise them at other instances, and I will remind them that they're loved and how much I love them. But it's really kind of important, I think, piece not to overlook, because it creates a huge vacuum for children later on in life, and they thirst and need that nourishment, and they try and compensate it for all sorts of kind of funny ways later in life.
Right. Okay. Producer Kashif, the voice behind the production chair. Let's throw out some questions, please.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a few come in from before.
Questions.
Yes, this is a live session. Yes, absolutely. It's as live as live gets.
So before we do that, though, inshallah, just want to talk about 2 things. So one, we have a book sitting there. Brother Murtaza, if you just want to hold it up.
Absolutely. You want me to do the honors? Sure. There you go.
And then maybe, Saqib, you could just tell us a little bit about this book and why you wrote it and where folks can get it.
Yeah, so Being Muslim Today is available at all major bookstores. And the reason I wrote it, it was something that I had been thinking about for a decade. Like, it's not something that came out of nowhere. It's like an idea that we should have a book on Islam, which bridged serious scholarship with a language and writing style which was really easy to read, which was enjoyable. So there was a kind of piece around that from the beginning. And then my eldest son of 3 years ago, he came up to me and says, I'm watching my football game politely on a Saturday morning, and he knows never to disturb me while I'm watching these games. He comes up to me and says, Papa, is Islam a violent religion? And at first I thought he's kind of asking me a stupid question to wind me up. I looked at him and I could tell that it was a serious question.
Okay.
It was a serious question. I was like, this is a bit of a disturbing question. And a few things went through my brain cell. I ran off to my library looking for a good book which he could read and enjoy, because he enjoys reading books. And I found nothing there that was both intellectually honest, like scholarly honest,
sure,
but easy to read. Like, I've got a bunch of books which were kind of very academic. I have a PhD, right, and so my interests tend to be a bit more pie in the sky. And so I went online, and again, I couldn't find a book which was really kind of easy to read, but which captured an awful lot of rigorous top-tier scholarship behind it.
Okay.
And so that was this journey of Being Muslim Today. That was really a response to my son's question, and trying to explain to him what this religion is about, how it started, what we know about it, what we don't know about it,
okay,
the extent to what we think we know about it. So there are many claims that I grew up with, which I just took at face value. And then when I began probing, I realized that scholarship was like, yes, this is the claim, but there's not a lot of evidence behind it.
All right.
You know,
All right.
and you can make of that what you will. And so I put that out there as well, because the younger generation is very independently minded. They're anti-authoritarian. They've got their Uncle Google and Auntie Wikipedia on every single iPad.
Definitely.
And so you tell them that they shouldn't be eating 2 eggs in a day. I mean, you're going to get pushback straight away. You're going to get WebMD responds, so-and-so medical journal responds. So I figured that you may as well just be damn honest about everything that we know and the extent to which we know it. Like, there are many things that we would like to think we know, but the evidence underlying that is very weak. So, for instance, the last Prophet Prophet's birth year is meant to be 570. Now you probe and say, okay, where's the evidence for that? Not a lot. Right. Is it consequential? Perhaps not. But it's very interesting that everybody seems to think it's 570. But then when you kind of push under the surface of it and say, what's the basis of that? It's actually very, very weak. Should a 15, 18-year-old know about that? Well, I'd rather tell them the bits and pieces that they're going to find out in any case. I'd rather go out and say, look, this is what we know. This is what we don't know. You can't go figure it out. And what I also found fascinating was that there are parts of Islam that I learned in writing and researching this book, which were quite fantastic. Like, literally kind of blew my mind. There were certain elements that were like really kind of made me think the entire thing through. So one was the emphasis that Islam had, particularly in the early centuries, on tasawwuf, on the kind of what came out of Sufism and what have you. It was a very strong emphasis in the earlier centuries. That really, I was not expecting to read about that. And the second was the extent to which the last Prophet effected what I now think is the most profound gender revolution in the history of our species. Which is kind of odd, because here you have a religion which is associated now, branded with with misogyny and women's rights and the veil, and for me to then go into a book and write a book and write about actually what he may have done was effected the most profound gender revolution in history. That was like a bit of a shock to me. Like, whoa, why isn't this out there? Why aren't people talking about this?
Right.
And so that's the genesis of the book, and that's really what I was trying to achieve. Like, and create a bit of a debate and discussion. Like, what? It's okay to think. It's okay to challenge. So it's okay to question. It's okay to ask, what is the basis that we know the birth year of the last prophet? What is the basis of that? How do we know that? And put it all out there and hopefully get some thinking going.
Oh, I mean, I look, from what I'm just hearing, that's phenomenal. To try to put a word to it, and I'll say why. Look, for as long as I can remember, my personal and professional focus has always been transparency equals accountability. And when I tell that to somebody, then it clicks. And I'll tell you why. And I'll look into the camera. I do this thing where I look into the camera. When you're transparent with somebody, even for the youngest generation, who, to Saqib's point, they will Google instantly, or they'll go to Instagram, or they'll go to TikTok. These are now their sources of truth. Whether we as parents even if we're pushing 50 or younger or older, we have to take that into account. Okay, especially for the youngest generation, we have to take this into account now. If we deny it, then we're not doing ourselves any favors. So these are those instant sources of truth. So we might as well be fully transparent with our children, because then that can build trust and accountability. And once our children and we are accountable with them, that just builds for better parenting.
Yeah,
that's it. End of story.
If I could just interject there,
please.
Because there's one piece of feedback that I got from a person who had read my book, and the person reached out to me and said, I was on the verge of leaving Islam.
Oh,
I read your book and I'm now back in. And I was like, holy smokes,
Wow.
And the thing is that what stunned me is that this book is not designed to convince you to become a Muslim. It's not designed to sell Islam. Okay. This is a book which says, look, this is what we know about the faith, broadly speaking. Obviously, it's only about 350 odd pages, so it can't capture everything, but the high level of what we know about the faith. And yet you have a person who's being fed a bunch of information about Islam, is moving more and more and more away, and then finally comes back and says, I read your book and I'm now back in. And it's actually a very
Awesome.
similar response to my middle son, who just finished reading the book. And he was like, Papa, you really answered a lot of questions that I had, but I didn't really want to ask them. I was like, man, that's the purpose of what I did.
Phenomenal. Again, just fantastic. Producer Kashif, please, we want to hear some questions from the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So on Instagram, when we put a call out for questions, we did have some questions about, like, for the Muslims that are not seeking to take on interest, right? So I do know you have something to that too, that you offer individuals. So I'll get that on the screen too. But the question was specifically after that was, as an entrepreneur, can you do it without taking on interest debt?
So we started a program. So, but by way of background, prior to 3 years ago, I was developing real estate. Which camera am I looking at, by the way? That one. Okay. Yeah. So prior to 3 years ago, most of my work was in developing real estate, and that real estate had debt and therefore interest to it. And we've changed last year to offer specifically for Muslim investors the opportunity to invest in real estate projects which have no debt and no interest. So we've got our third project going right now on that. It's fantastic. These are really for friends and family investors in the Muslim community that I know, and they have benefited very, very well. And parallel to the opportunity to invest that I made available to friends and family, the other thing that we began doing was to roll out a debt-free academy real estate course. And the idea being, it demonstrates step by step what a person has to do in order to develop real estate, put not a lot of their own money in, if any, and do it without debt. It can be done. I had to think quite carefully about it. I had to kind of really reflect on how it might happen, how it might not happen. But we've really put a fantastic program in. I mean, if you look at some of the reviews that we've had for our debt-free academy, fantastic. Like, I am really proud of that program, because 4 years ago, I would have answered that, debt-free real estate development is not going to fly. And I've now changed my mind on that to realize actually it has a very, very strong space if it's done in a particular path.
Perfect. And as so the question that came in was, as an entrepreneur, can you do it without taking on interest-bearing, like, loans and debt and financing?
So I can't speak to entrepreneurship in a whole bunch of different industries, because I've never done entrepreneurship in healthcare, for instance, but I will speak to it in real estate. You can be an entrepreneur in real estate without taking on debt and without having to put an awful lot of your own money in as well. So that's definitely doable. That is what the Debt-Free Academy program is all about. I'm very excited by that program, because I'm just seeing a lot of energy and people excited by what they're doing, and on the verge now. We just started it a few months ago, but many are on the verge of starting their very first development projects.
Okay.
Then another question that had come in was, sorry, the chat integration is not working, so I'm going to be reading it off here. I'm just looking it up here. So how do you watch loved ones just chase and sacrifice everything on bad ideas that just aren't working? Oh. Maybe even as an entrepreneur, like, how do you know when to give up on something or
pivot or just, call it a day for whatever reason?
I don't like going into something where failure is an option.
Okay.
So there's always a way to fix something or pivot something. There's always got to be a way. The one exception that I can think of in my entire life has been when my father passed away. I couldn't bring him back. There's nothing that I could do.
Of course.
But to, I gave, I had nothing. There's nothing that I could do there. Mm-hmm. But I don't like being in situations where failure is an option. Mentally, I don't let it happen. And so if something isn't working out, why isn't it working out? What needs to change to make it work out? Do I have to change something? Do I have to work with somebody else? Do I have to outsource a piece here? Do I have to change the angle here? Do I have to knock on somebody's door? There's got to be a range of solutions if you put enough energy and time and thought into it. And if you can't figure that out, go get hold of 2 or 3 people who've got a bit of experience and say, look, this is a situation. What do you think? And one of them is going to have a half decent solution for you, or provoke a half decent solution from you.
Right. And let me then chime in as well, interject as well. I think from a family perspective, right? if I don't know who the spouse is, but if the spouse and the children are feeling it, I'm just going to go a completely different angle here, perhaps the opposite end of the spectrum, and say it may not even have anything to do with failure or success. But if the family is feeling your absence, if the children are feeling your absence, because you know what, you are giving it that all, you're sacrificing endless hours in the day, and you're just absent. Because again, this the whole focus of this podcast is on a happy, strong family, right? So that's where my kind of heart bleeds, and I'm like, ugh. So when the family is feeling it, it might be the moment for that spouse, again, the wife or the husband or the wife, to say, hey, look, partner, spouse, you know, we, as in the collective family unit, we're feeling your absence right now. You may be giving it your all for this venture, for this business, for this beautiful thing you have, but let's look at that work-life balance.
Yeah.
Right. Like you were saying, maybe that's the missing piece.
Yeah.
Or again, having been in the corporate world for an endless number of years, there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, you know what, I'm gonna pause, and maybe it is time for me to go back in the corporate world, or maybe it is time for me to be in the corporate world for a number of years so that I can dedicate more time, because it is that typical, stereotypical 9-to-5 job. And I know I'm generalizing here, but there's nothing wrong with that either. I just wanted to add a different counterpoint to it as well. Just hopefully maybe that answers the question.
Yep. And then we had also put out a call out of like, what is holding people back from entrepreneurship? What is their fear, right?
Okay.
So,
he's all smiles again. Okay. Yes. Saqib, please.
So there was a few people that responded with, you know, they need that full-time corporate job because they have responsibilities, right? And they don't want to risk the responsibilities they have.
Yeah.
So can you start becoming an entrepreneur while you're sort of working that full-time job to support your family, or do you have to go like all in to succeed?
Yeah, great question.
You can do both. You can do one or the other. I went all in. Like, I arrived in Toronto 2011, and I was like, there's no way I'm participating in the employment life of this city and country. Like, I'm not going to be employed. And I was like, okay, that's a decision made, done. Now, what's an alternative to that? So the problem with maintaining this kind of, I'm going to remain in a corporate job while also trying to be an entrepreneur, is that entrepreneurship is a function of energy and resilience. If you're coming home at 7 p.m. exhausted, time in, time out, time in, time out, time in, time out, your energy is sapped, your vitality is sapped, the kind of proactive problem solving, you know, is sapped. You're not, the mind doesn't want to tackle difficult problems after your commute at 7 p.m. Okay,
fair enough.
And that's the hardest part, I think, with the kind of dual existence.
Yeah, that's fair. I'll offer a counterpoint as well. Whether you maybe want to look at something fractional in the corporate world, that happens. It may not happen for every role. You may want to scale back your hours, and maybe if it's at all possible, do a part-time role. Or you know what? Hey, if you're taking the go to get from here to Markham to downtown Toronto, takes an hour. Solid. No matter what you do, it takes an hour. So that hour commute, hey, you know what? That might be the time where you bring on board more partners or co-founders or consultants or strategists or advisors into your business, into your startup or your venture, and say, hey guys, look, we're having a team huddle at 8 a.m. while I'm on the go, but this might be the best time to put in that energy, to put in the vitality. Look, it's all about how you optimize and use your time, right? But Saqib makes a great point, and sometimes it is that that factor of how much time and effort and energy can you put in, even if you're pushing 50. It's a running joke apparently between us. So there you go. All right, producer Kashish.
Yeah. So another question just came in. I don't know. Maybe you can't answer this because you're not familiar with these shows, but someone's asking, do you recommend children to watch Dragon's Den and Shark Tank?
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Not really, because they're a very flippant kind of, it's just like a very flippant way to understand entrepreneurship. There is a craft and a skill set to bringing on investment capital from third parties, from friends and family. There's a craft of doing that. It's not something that these TV shows do a great job in portraying. It's entertaining, yes, but would I recommend children watch it? Not really. I mean, certainly I've never thought about recommending it to my kids. It just strikes me as a bit too cheap and entertainment for any meaningful insight and knowledge.
Perfect. And then there's a question that came in. I guess maybe a follow-up is, so obviously you're also like an angel investor investing. So what are some what did it say? Absolute must-nots when you get in front of an investor? Like, have you seen anything that just, okay, this person should not be doing this at all?
So the number one thing that I look for when I make an angel investment is skin in the game. If the sponsors have skin in the game, then that gives me massive comfort. And I can give you a wonderful illustration to elucidate this point, which was an entrepreneur contacted me not long ago and said, I want to raise X amount of dollars for this amazing venture. I've got 3 senior management people and 2 top tier board advisors on board. So I said, how much money are you putting into this project? And he gave me some very small number, like $20,000 or $30,000 out of 5, 6, 7 million that he wanted to raise. I thought that's a bit low. I said, okay, how about your senior management team? How much are they putting in of their cash? He said 0. And I said, okay, that's interesting. How about these advisors, these amazing kind of branded, famous, popular advisors? He said 0. So I said, look, dude, there's 6 of you here. You think your idea is so amazing that the collective 6 of you are putting in $20,000 out of 7 million or 6 million. What did that tell me?
Right.
And that conversation just ended. So skin in the game is important, because what it does is that the entrepreneur who's got a lot to lose, the efficiency of mind and the willingness to learn goes through the roof.
Right.
The work ethic goes through the roof. They've got a lot to lose. They can't just walk away. If there's a problem and they can't find a solution, they will find the solution the next day. They'll put the energy and effort in because they've got a lot to lose. If they've got nothing to lose and they'll just walk into another job with Jeff Bezos' team or somewhere else, okay, then it's like, dude, you know what? That energy, that efficiency of mind, that ethic is not going to be there. They will leave stones unturned. Whereas somebody who's got a lot to lose, man, they're thinking smart and fast.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Good answer. And it makes sense. 100% makes sense. You have to have skin in the game. Yeah. That's for sure, Saqib. All right, Producer Kashif, we're approaching the 45-minute mark. Yeah. Other questions or?
Yep. Someone was asking, where do they learn more about Debt Free Academy?
Okay.
So I just put it at SaqibQureshi.com. You can go to the website there and find out.
I must say, I actually look quite smart in that photograph. I quite like that. Where did that photograph come from on the Debt Free Academy website?
I'm not
sure. My goodness.
And then there was another question that came in about, should we read biographies of successful entrepreneurs, and who's like an entrepreneur that excites you? Like, a lot of people read like Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, or.
I mean, I've read biographies of entrepreneurs. I'm not entirely sure that they've really been that meaningful to me in terms of my entrepreneurial journey. What has been meaningful to me in terms of learning about entrepreneurship is not reading about it; it's just doing it.
Okay.
It's the actual doing, the actual. And I say this as somebody who's a PhD, who's still involved in the teaching at a university. I respect academic knowledge. I don't want to dismiss it, but for me, I struggle to see how you can be taught entrepreneurship through a book, a classroom, a lecture. It's fundamentally a combination of doing it and then reflecting on that doing, and then talking to somebody else as a mentor or an advisor about what you've done, and that iterative learning curve that those 3 components bring to bear. That is what gets you there as an entrepreneur. And it's all fueled by ambition and motivation and resilience and energy.
Okay. You know what? At the end of the day, it's to Saqib's point, how much of yourself you're willing to put out there, right? Like, how much of you are you willing to say, this is me as entrepreneur? Whereas if you're going to hold back, if you're not willing to pivot, if you're not willing to continually learn, I think the hallmark of any good entrepreneur, or even someone as an outside observer, having spent so much time in the corporate world, anyone who is either in the corporate world or in the entrepreneur world or a startup, it really is just how much action are you willing to take? How biased are you towards action rather than just reflect, or maybe take a very academic approach? Or is it like, you overanalyze things to death? Look, mistakes happen. And as Saqib has been saying continually, it's not so much about success after success after success. Failure in and of itself teaches success. Let me mention that again. Failure is not failure until you deem it a failure. If you see that failure as something to reflect upon, something to learn against, and that in and of itself bears fruit to say, you know what, this is where I pivot. This is where I make that micro change. This is now where I can be like, oh, you know what? Yes, I just need to course correct, or I need to seek help. I need, my advisors, or I need this, gap filled. Again, there's ways to course correct, and there's ways to kind of work around the solution. But entrepreneurship is just that. And I think for many people out there, especially the younger generation, you know what, like, just go out there and do it. Have a great support network. You need that support network for one. You need mentors. I spent some time in Riyadh, and I was speaking with a particular CIO of a video conferencing company, and that person taught me the concept of a reverse mentor. And I'm like, what do you mean? And it's like a reverse mentor. And again, he's somebody who's now, let's just say, part of the 50 club. And he said, I learn as much from my first year employees, someone who's just come into company X, as I do from my inner circle of C-level executives. And I'm like, oh, interesting. And he's like, yeah, because they're just recent graduates. They're very kind of plugged in with the world. They have new ways of learning, new ways of working. So meaning this C-level executive, spends 20 minutes checking in and getting that reverse mentorship, right? So it's not so much about this first year employee, saying, hey, can you be my mentor? Can you be my coach? It's more the C-level executive saying, you know what, I want to learn from you. So that can also help it. That can also work with entrepreneurship. Just ways of learning, ways of working, and having more a bias towards action. Maybe to sum it up. Producer Kashif, any more questions?
Yeah, one just came in.
Okay.
So this one I can display on the screen because it's integrated.
Phenomenal.
Sales might be the hardest part when getting businesses to start. What are some unique ways in today's world to get sales in any industry? So I don't know if you have a thought or two on that.
Oh my goodness, that's a fairly broad question, because sales, it's so industry and business specific. It's perhaps too broad for me to tackle. Sales in, let's say, the food and beverage world is a very different proposition than it is, let's say, in the consulting world. The one thing that occurs to me that sales people could do well to remind themselves of, though, is that they're dealing with human beings. And it's not just a number. And in treating other people as human beings, which is, frankly speaking, an ethical and moral obligation, I think there's also a selling benefit. Not that I encourage people to treat human beings so that they can sell more to them, but it's just kind of keeping in the back of your mind that if you can see your customers as human beings first and foremost, it goes a long way to changing what you will do with them and how and all the rest of it. And it's something that I think the kind of modern world is losing sight of. It's losing sight of the reality that whether we are customers or investors or Black or Chinese or whatever else, we are fundamentally human beings first. That's where we get our value from, and everything else is very secondary. I think there's a strong element of us losing sight of that in the late modern, kind of postmodern era.
Right. Let me add a different dimension, and that's basically solve a pain point. I've spent my time in sales, corporate development, business development, partnership development, and I find the common thread in all of this is just how are you solving somebody's pain point? If you're calling up a C-level executive, a manager, a director, whoever, a buyer, someone in procurement, like, to start the conversation, as Saqib is saying, rightfully so, obviously you need to connect with them, but don't be so flippant. Just be like, hey, how's your day? Like, what kind of answer are you going to give? Yeah, fine. And then what? Your backup, that person's back is already up against the wall, right? Like, build a relationship, build some rapport. Obviously, there are things you can do, in and around that. Maybe hold a workshop, hold a lunch and learn, hold a conference or something. There are certain things you can do rather than just, cold call somebody to death. But that being said, in sales, it's all about building a relationship, having that rapport. But also equally important, if not more important, is what are you doing to help solve their pain point? Obviously, you have a solution, you have a product that is meant, hopefully, to solve their pain point, or else what kind of business are you doing? And obviously, you're calling somebody that hopefully you've done enough research and say, oh, you know what, this is the potential buyer of product or solution X, Y, Z. So, tell them that you're there to help them, either as someone who's in their, circle, or, you just want to be seen as a trusted advisor. But tell them upfront that, yes, this will save them X amount of dollars or X amount of time. You have so many references, you have so many customers, you have so many, customer testimonials. Build that trust, build that rapport, build that transparency, which then equals accountability. So, all right, Producer Kashif.
No more questions, but I just want to add a personal observation because, we're talking about the importance and the benefits of entrepreneurship, and just getting ready for this podcast. I did notice on your social media, mashallah, you're very active about human rights and the injustices in the world, and you post about our brothers and sisters in Palestine. And I was just thinking, wow, there's a lot of us that can't do that because we're stuck in the corporate world. Like the tweet could get us in trouble. So it just hit me then that this is why being our own bosses and entrepreneurship is important, because then those voices can be heard, right? And our networks, our platforms would know the truth and recognize the suffering. So
excellent point.
I think that's it just hit me as an importance of why we need people taking control and getting out of that rat race, as we mentioned. So
there are a lot of people who are employed in Canada who are absolutely sickened by what their employers have done with respect to the situation in Palestine. RBC is a great example. I have no qualms about flagging them. Donated $1 million to charities associated with Israel. Yet Israel is widely accused and most likely has committed genocide. RBC's lips are shut. All the Muslim employees at RBC must be sickened that part of their salaries, part of their work effort went into funding charities associated with Israel. It's like, it's an awful, nauseous place to be. And so I'm very, very grateful to be able to speak my mind, because, I don't really have an employer, and it's fantastic freedom to have, the freedom to express myself and live my life.
So just for others that might be in the same position, is there any, like when you tweet something, is there any fear that, hey, this might infect like someone that wants a client or someone that wants to do business with me, or it just doesn't matter? Like,
I don't care. I'm not interested in anybody. I'm just not interested in anybody who has a problem with my opposition to genocide.
There you go. So
yeah, excellent answer. And again, why would you even want a client like that?
Yeah.
Right. And at the end of the day, look, I'll now throw in, this might be this is a good segue, but at the end of the day, this show is as much about cultivating a happy, strong family as it is about, Muslim values, right? So as a Muslim, as a practicing Muslim, you need to have that faith to say, you know what, Allah is the one that is the sustainer. He's the one that, is the one to provide from places known and unknown. So as practicing Muslims, or as Muslims, if we have that faith, and if our faith is not strong enough, then, we should strengthen our faith and our deen and our iman to say, you know what, to your point, I don't care. Yeah. And Allah is the one that provides, not humans. If we have faith in humans to provide, then 9 times out of 10, that'll backfire on us, because it's ultimately Allah, God that provides, right? And whatever faith you may be, as long as you believe in God, I, for one, strongly believe that, it's your creator that is the sustainer at the end of the day. No matter what language you say that in, regardless of what faith or path or spirituality you are on, as your creator, he's the one that is the ultimate provider, not people. We all work through people. Look, money's not going to fall from the sky. And as Saqib has been saying over and over again, it is all about effort. It is all about resilience. It is all about grit. So as much as we're laughing and smiling, look, at the end of the day, we're human, right? And we're prone to mistakes. We're prone to failures. But I think from what we've been saying again and again and again, failure is not an option as long as you see it as something you can learn from, something you can change, something you can pivot, and at the end of the day, something that you can control. That is the ultimate luxury of having your own business, right? Whether you use that platform of being Mrs. So-and-so or Mr. So-and-so or Miss So-and-so and saying, look, I am the CEO of my own company and I have every right to say this, this, and this. I have every right to take a morning off and block off 4 hours of my time, right? To, do that self-care or to kind of focus on my mental health. And have every right to hire whom I want, when I want, and to build that team of people who have that like-minded value, that like-minded mission, and so on. So we did say off air that podcast is typically around 45 minutes. We're pushing up to the hour. So Producer Kashif, any last words you wanna get in? You've already given us a thumbs up. So
yeah, well, we're getting a lot of comments of thanks and good podcast. So I've been displaying those on the screen. So
excellent, thank you.
Just want to pass those along to you guys also.
All right,
thank you,
everybody. Saqib, you want to maybe look in the camera? Any last words?
Last words? Well, no, not really. I think actually, you know what? Now that you've given me the opportunity, I will say that my late father made a very interesting point to me in his late 60s, a few years before he passed away. He was sat on the couch and he leaned back and he says to me, Saqib beta, I don't know anybody in entrepreneurship who's failed because they didn't put the effort in. I said, what do you mean? He said, because really starting your own business is all about the effort and energy. And everybody that I know that put the effort and energy into their business has succeeded. And at the time, it didn't quite hit me just how profound that statement was. And since then, despite all of my academic kind of knowledge and, postmodern philosophy and all the rest of it, and business insight, I have now bought the argument that entrepreneurship is fundamentally about energy and tenacity and persistence. It's not about any other factor more important than those three. It's like that's fundamentally what it is. If you're prepared to work hard and keep at it, you will, God willing, you will succeed.
Okay, let's wrap it up. Thank you for tuning in. It's always a pleasure to host the Happy Strong Family podcast with such wonderful guests. Thank you, Saqib. It's been very insightful. And I do hope that it's insightful for the youth, certainly for my children and within my own circle. A lot of the youth are asking these types of questions. What can I do? What should I do? Should I even get into business? Should I get into the corporate world? Should I work for so-and-so? And yes, there is apparently a song about Jeffrey Bezos. So, when you are looking at, successful business people, look also within yourself, find out, do you have that level of energy, that passion, and everything else will follow. If you are passionate about something, then definitely that should inshallah transfer, equate into your success. Just recently my daughter and I were at Abu Bakr Masjid in Scarborough, and we were speaking. The Toronto Police Services were there. They were obviously recruiting for Muslims to join the police force. Obviously, why? Because representation matters. And the officer said something very beautiful and wonderful. He said, you know what, just follow your passions. If you want to get into policing and serve the community, it's all about just giving back to the community. It's all about, if you have that passion, then follow it through. So, you know, if you have that passion, follow it through. If you want to start a business, obviously educate yourself, put in the time, put in the effort, and inshallah, God willing, success will follow. We'll wrap it up from there. Tune in often every Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern. Come back here, follow, subscribe, and do all the wonderful things to spread the word about this podcast. Jazakallah khair. This is Brother Mushtaq signing off for the Happy Strong Family Weekly Live.